David Chen stared at the Manhattan skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, barely registering the golden sunset that painted the glass buildings in brilliant hues of amber and rose. At 42, he had everything he'd ever dreamed of. TechVision, his software company, had just closed another record-breaking quarter, and Forbes had recently featured him in their 40 under 40 list. Yet lately the victory felt hollow. His phone buzzed with another notification, probably Regina from the board following up on the upcoming merger. David ignored it, instead reaching for the crystal decanter on his desk. The bourbon caught the dying sunlight as he poured himself 2 fingers worth, a nightly ritual that had become more frequent over the past few months. The massive TV screen mounted on his office wall filled the silence with CNBC's market analysis. Its constant chatter, a familiar companion during his late nights at the office. He loosened his tie, sinking into the leather armchair that cost more than some people's monthly salary. And now, we have a special segment, the anchor's voice cut through his thoughts. Live from Carnegie Hall, the Young Virtuosos competition's final performance. David's finger hovered over the remote, ready to change the channel. Classical. Music wasn't his thing. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the bourbon, or perhaps the peculiar melancholy that had been shadowing him lately. The camera panned across the historic venue before settling on a grand piano center stage. A young boy, no more than 8, walked confidently to the instrument. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, his dark hair neatly combed to the side. There was something eerily familiar about his posture, the way he carried himself with quiet determination. The boy sat at the piano, and without any sheet music began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in B-flat minor filled the room. But this wasn't just another child prodigy's technical display. The music carried an emotional depth that seemed impossible for someone so young. Each note resonated with longing, with unspoken stories. David set down his glass, transfixed. The boy's fingers danced across the keys with both precision and passion, his body swaying slightly with the music's ebb and flow. As the camera zoomed in on his face, David's heart stopped. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. They were his own. The same unusual amber color, the same slight upturn at the corners, the same intensity he saw every morning in the mirror. The room began to spin. David gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. It couldn't be. The timing. It would have been right around when. "Ladies and gentlemen, that was Leonardo Morrison," the announcer's voice cut through his thoughts. "And he's dedicated tonight's performance to his mother, Alice Morrison, who's been his only parent and first music teacher." The camera cut to the audience, focusing on a woman with elegant silver streaks in her dark hair, tears streaming down her face as she applauded Alice. 8 years had changed her, but David would know her anywhere. The same graceful neck, the same gentle smile that had once made his heart race, and still did, he realized with a jolt. His glass slipped from his trembling fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Bourbon spread like spilled blood across the pristine surface, but David barely noticed. Memories he'd spent years suppressing came rushing back in a flood. "I'm pregnant, David." "We can't do this now, Alice. The company's at a crucial stage. I'm not ready to be a father." "So that's it? You want me to just get rid of it?" "It's the logical solution. We're both too young, too focused on our careers. Please, Alice, be reasonable." The last time he'd seen her, she'd been standing in his office, this very office, her face a mask of disbelief and heartbreak. She hadn't cried, hadn't screamed. She'd simply turned and walked away. Within a week, she'd resigned from her position as TechVision's lead software developer and disappeared completely. David had told himself it was for the best. He'd thrown himself into building his empire, using work to drown out the ghost of her voice, the memory of her touch. He'd convinced himself that the occasional dreams of what might have been were just stress-induced fantasies. But now, watching Leonardo, his son, take a final bow on stage, David felt the carefully constructed walls of his life crumbling. The boy's talent, his passion, his very existence, All of it was a testament to Alice's strength and his own cowardice. With shaking hands, David reached for his phone. He pulled up his browser and typed Leonardo Morrison pianist. Dozens of articles appeared. Child prodigy takes classical world by storm. Leonardo Morrison, the future of classical music. Single mom nurtures son's extraordinary gift. The photos showed Leo at various performances, always with Alice by his side. In every image they were smiling, their bond palpable even through the screen. They had built a beautiful life without him, while he'd built an empire of glass and steel that suddenly felt meaningless. David clicked on a recent interview with Alice. She spoke eloquently about nurturing Leo's talent, about the challenges and joys of raising a gifted child alone. Not once did she mention Leo's father, but her eyes, those expressive eyes he'd once known so well, held a shadow of old pain when the interviewer delicately broached the subject. The bourbon bottle beckoned, but David pushed it away. For the first time in years, he needed clarity. He pulled up his email, started a new message to his assistant. Cancel all my meetings for the next week. Personal emergency. Then he opened to another tab and began searching for information about the Young Virtuosos competition. Leo would have more performances, more appearances. There would be opportunities to see him, to approach Alice, to try to what? Apologize? Make amends? Ask for a place in their lives after 8 years of absence? The magnitude of what he'd thrown away hit him like a physical blow. But watching the video of Leo's performance again, seeing his son's passion and Alice's pride, David knew he couldn't walk away. Not this time. He'd made the biggest mistake of his life once by choosing his ambition over love. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Outside his window, night had fallen over Manhattan. The city lights twinkled like stars, and somewhere out there, a woman and a boy, his family, were celebrating a triumphant performance. David stood, his decision made. It was time to face the music. The morning after Leo's performance, David sat in his Tesla outside the Brooklyn Academy of Music, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. According to the schedule he'd found online, Leo had a masterclass here today. He'd arrived an hour early, parking where he could see the entrance, feeling every bit like the stalker he'd become. His phone buzzed for the 20th time that morning. Regina again, probably furious about his sudden disappearance from work. He silenced it without looking. The merger could wait. Everything could wait. A sleek Volvo pulled into the parking lot and David's heart stopped. Alice stepped out looking professional in a navy blazer and matching slacks. Leo emerged from the passenger side, carrying a leather music portfolio. Even from this distance, David could see how the boy moved with his mother's grace and his own determined stride. Before he could think better of it, David got out of his car. The cool October air hit his face, carrying the scent of coffee from a nearby cafe. Alice was helping Leo with his backpack, her back to David. He took one step forward, then another. Alice. She froze. Leo looked up, curious about the stranger who'd called his mother's name. Alice turned slowly, her face a carefully composed mask that cracked the moment their eyes met. David. His name fell from her lips like a stone into still water. She instinctively moved to stand between him and Leo, a mother's protective instinct that made David's chest ache. Mom? Leo's voice carried a note of concern. Who is he? Alice's hands trembled as she gripped Leo's shoulders. Honey, go inside. Ms. Chen is waiting for you. But please, Leo, I'll be right there. Leo looked between them, his amber eyes, David's eyes, sharp with understanding beyond his years. He squeezed his mother's hand before walking toward the building, glancing back twice before disappearing inside. The moment the door closed behind him, Alice turned on David. How dare you? She hissed, her composed facade crumbling. How dare you show up here like this? I saw him perform last night, David said, his voice rough. On TV. He's incredible, Alice. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't pretend you have any right to be proud of him. You gave up that right 8 years ago. I know. David took a step forward, stopping when Alice automatically stepped back. I know I have no right. But please, just talk to me. Let me explain. Explain what? Her laugh was bitter. How you told me to terminate the problem because it would interfere with your precious company? How you said we were too young, too focused on our careers? She shook her head. I was there, David. I remember every word. I was wrong. The words felt insufficient, but they were all he had. I was terrified and selfish and wrong, and I've regretted it every day since. You left, have you? Alice's eyes flashed. Because from what I've read in the business magazines, you've done pretty well for yourself. CEO of the year, most innovative company, 40 under 40. Doesn't sound like a man drowning in regret. David ran a hand through his hair, fighting for the right words. I buried myself in work because it was easier than facing what I'd done. I told myself I'd made the right choice, the logical choice. But seeing Leo last night, his voice cracked. Seeing the amazing person he's become, seeing you with him, I realized what I threw away. He's not amazing because of you, Alice said sharply. He's amazing because he's worked incredibly hard, because he's passionate and determined and kind, all on his own, without any help from his father. I know that. David took another careful step forward. This time, Alice didn't retreat. I know you've done an incredible job raising him. I'm not here to take credit for anything. I want to know him, Alice, and I want to make things right with you, if I can. Make things right? Alice wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture so familiar it made David's heart ache. Do you have any idea what it was like? Being 26, pregnant, and completely alone? Having to start over in a new city, build a new career, all while preparing to be a single mother? No, David admitted. I don't. But I want to understand. Please, Alice, just have coffee with me. Tell me about him. Tell me about your life. I'll listen to whatever you want to say, even if it's just to tell me how much you hate me. Alice was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. David stood still under her scrutiny, letting her see the years of regret etched into the lines, around his eyes the gray beginning to pepper his temples. Finally, she sighed. I don't hate you, David. I wish I did. It would be easier. She glanced at her watch. Leo's masterclass is 2 hours. There's a coffee shop around the corner. Relief flooded through him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Leo. Because someday, he's going to ask questions about his father, and I need to be able to tell him I gave you a chance to. Explain yourself. They walked in silence to the cafe, the space between them heavy with unspoken words. The barista greeted Alice by name, clearly a regular, and soon they were seated in a quiet corner, 2 steaming cups between them. He's been playing since he was 4, Alice said without preamble. It started with a toy keyboard from a yard sale. Within a month, he could pick out any melody he heard. By 5, he was composing his own pieces. David leaned forward, drinking, in every detail. Does he know about me? He knows his father wasn't ready to be a parent. Alice's fingers tightened around her cup. I've never lied to him, but I've never told him everything either. He's still so young, and I wanted to protect him from, she gestured between them, from all of this. I understand, David swallowed hard. Has he ever asked about me? Sometimes. Usually after competitions, when he sees other kids with their fathers. Alice's voice softened slightly. He's very perceptive. I think he's figured out more than I've told him. Like father, like son, David murmured, then winced at Alice's sharp look. Sorry, I didn't mean. No, you're right. Alice's laugh held a hint of genuine amusement. He is like you in some ways. Stubborn, focused. When he sets his mind to something, nothing can distract him. But he has your heart, David said quietly. I could see it in his playing. That depth of feeling, that's all you, Alice. She looked away, blinking rapidly. What do you want, David, really? Because if you think you can just walk into his life now after 8 years, I want whatever you're willing to give me, he interrupted. A chance to apologize properly, a chance to get to know my son, a chance to show you both that I'm not the same selfish kid I was 8 years ago. And if I say no, then I'll respect that. The words hurt, but he meant them. But I'll ask you to think about it. Not for my sake, but for Leo's. Let him decide if he wants to know me. Alice was quiet for a long time, stirring her cooling coffee. Finally, she pulled out her phone and opened her calendar. He has another performance next weekend, at the Wellington Center, if you want to come. She looked up at him. But you'll watch from the audience, no approaching him, no trying to talk to him. Not until I've had a chance to prepare him. Thank you, David breathed. Alice, don't make me regret this. She cut him off, standing. I need to get back to Leo. David watched her walk away, her head high, her steps measured. Through the cafe window, he saw her pause at the corner, one hand rising to wipe her eyes before she crossed the street. He pulled out his phone and added the Wellington Center performance to his calendar. It wasn't much, just a tiny crack in the wall between him and the family he'd abandoned. But it was a start, and this time he wouldn't waste it. The Wellington Center's concert hall hummed with anticipation as David slipped into his seat in the third row. He'd arrived early, watching families file in with programs and excited whispers. A woman in front of him helped her daughter adjust a sparkly hair bow, clearly another young performer's parent. The sight made his chest tighten with regret. He spotted Alice in the wings kneeling before Leo as she straightened his bow tie. Even from this distance, David could read the gentle encouragement in her gestures, the way Leo's shoulders relaxed under her touch. She pressed a kiss to his forehead before disappearing backstage, leaving their son alone in the shadows. The teal lights dimmed and a distinguished-looking woman stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wellington Center's Young Artists Showcase. Our first performer tonight is a remarkable young man who has been captivating audiences across the country. Please welcome Leonardo Morrison, performing his original composition, Memories in Minor. David's breath caught as Leo walked onto the stage. The boy moved with quiet confidence, acknowledging the audience with a slight bow before settling at the piano. His small hands hovered over the keys for a moment, and then the music began. The composition started softly, almost hesitantly, a questioning melody that seemed to search for something just out of reach. As the piece progressed, the notes grew more complex, interweaving themes of longing and hope. David closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. He could hear echoes of Chopin in the phrasing, hints of Debussy in the harmonies, but the emotional core of the piece was purely Leo's own. In the middle section, the melody fragmented into something almost angry, discordant notes clashing and resolving, like questions demanding answers. David opened his eyes to watch his son's face. Leo's expression was intense, lost in the story he was telling through his music. The final movement emerged like sunrise after a storm, the earlier themes returning, transformed but unbroken. As the last notes faded, David realized his cheeks were wet. The audience erupted in applause. Leo stood and bowed, his face flushed with achievement. A small bouquet of roses appeared from the wings, handed to him by a stagehand. The boy's smile widened as he spotted someone in the audience. Alice, David realized, who had slipped into a seat near the front during the performance. As Leo left the stage, David remained rooted to his spot while other performers came and went. His son's music echoed in his mind, speaking of absence and yearning in a way words never could. He wondered if Alice recognized the emotions Leo had poured into those keys, if she heard the questions he was asking through his composition. The showcase ended, and the audience began to disperse. David stood, intending to slip away as promised, when he heard a familiar voice behind him. That was quite a performance, wasn't it? He turned to find Alice watching him, her expression unreadable. Up close, he could see the subtle signs of strain around her eyes. This couldn't be easy for her either. It was incredible, David managed. The composition, I've never heard anything like it. He worked on it for months. Alice glanced toward the backstage area. He says it came to him in dreams. David nodded, understanding the weight of what she wasn't saying. Thank you for letting me be here tonight. He saw you, you know. Alice's words stopped him cold. During the performance, he has his father's keen eyes, notices everything. Did he? David's throat felt tight. Did he say anything? He asked if you were the man from the academy. Alice adjusted her purse strap, a nervous gesture. I told him we'd talk about it at home. Alice, she held up a hand. Not here. Leo's waiting for me at the reception, but... She pulled out her phone, tapped quickly, and David's phone buzzed. That's my address. Sunday afternoon if... You're free. It's time we had a proper conversation, all of us. David stared at the text message, his heart pounding. Are you sure? No. Alice's laugh was soft and a little bitter. But Leo deserves to know the truth, and he deserves to hear it from both of us. Before David could respond, a young girl bounded up to Alice. Mrs. Morrison, is Leo coming? To the reception? He promised to show me that chord progression from last week's class. Alice's face softened as she turned to the girl. He'll be there in a minute, Lily. Why don't you go save him some of those chocolate cookies he likes? As the girl scampered off, Alice looked back at David. Sunday at 2. Don't be late. David watched her walk away, her gray silk dress catching the light. He remembered another concert years ago when she'd worn a red dress and played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata at a university recital. He'd fallen in love with her that night, though it had taken him months to admit it. Outside the Wellington Center, the October evening had turned crisp. David pulled his coat tighter, but the chill he felt had nothing to do with the weather. In less than 48 hours, he would sit down with his son, really talk to him, for the first time. What could he possibly say? How did you explain to an 8-year-old that you'd been too scared, too selfish to be his father? How did you ask forgiveness for missing every birthday, every milestone, every skinned knee in triumph? His phone buzzed again. Another text from Alice. He likes chocolate chip pancakes for breakfast, and he's allergic to strawberries. Just things you should know. David stood there for a long time, reading and rereading those simple facts about his son. Each one felt like a gift he didn't deserve, and a reminder of how much he had missed. Finally, he typed back, "Thank you. I'll remember." On the drive home, David found himself humming fragments of Leo's composition. The questioning phrases, the unresolved harmonies, they were the musical expression of the very questions he'd have to answer on Sunday. In his penthouse, he walked past the familiar comfort of his bourbon decanter and went to his rarely used piano instead. Sitting at the keys, he picked out the main theme from Leo's piece, his unpracticed fingers stumbling over the notes his son had played so beautifully. The melody haunted him as he lay awake that night, twisting in expensive sheets that suddenly felt like strangers. Somewhere across the city, in what he imagined was a warm and loving home, his son was probably sleeping, perhaps dreaming up new melodies, while Alice kept her silent vigil over their shared secrets. Sunday was coming, and with it, the moment of truth. David had built his business empire on careful planning and strategic thinking, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. He could only hope that the same courage he'd seen in Leo's performance, the same grace he'd always admired in Alice, would somehow show him the way forward. As sleep finally claimed him, his last thought was of Leo's hands on the piano keys, creating beauty from pain, finding harmony in discord. Perhaps there was a lesson there if he was wise enough to learn it. David stood outside Alice's brownstone in Park Slope, a vintage record shop on one side and a small bookstore on the other. The neighborhood breathed artistic charm, so different from his sleek financial district world. He checked his watch. 1:55 p.m. Early, but not too early. In his hands, he clutched a carefully chosen gift, a leather-bound collection of Chopin's early manuscripts complete with the composer's handwritten notes. Before he could ring the bell, the door opened. Alice stood there in casual weekend clothes, dark jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her look younger, more like the woman he'd known 8 years ago. "You're early," she said, but without accusation. Traffic was lighter than I expected. He shifted uncomfortably. "Is Leo in the music room, practicing?" She stepped back to let him in. "He's nervous. Try not to take it personally." The hallway was lined with framed photos. Leo at various recitals, Leo blowing out birthday candles, Leo and Alice at what looked like Central Park. A family's life documented in moments he should have shared. Music drifted down from upstairs. Scales and arpeggios played with meticulous precision. Alice led him into a warm living room where sunlight streamed through bay windows. Books were everywhere, on shelves, stacked on the coffee table, even perched on the windowsills. Sheet music mingled with literary classics and scientific journals. "Leo," Alice called up the stairs. "Can you come down, please? We have company." The music stopped abruptly. Footsteps crossed the floor above them, then descended the stairs with deliberate slowness. Leo appeared in the doorway, still in his practice clothes, black pants and a white button-down shirt, his collar slightly askew. "Hello," he said formally, his eyes, so like David's own, studying the stranger in his living room. "Hi, Leo." David's voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. "I brought you something." He held out the book, trying to keep his hands steady. Leo looked to his mother, who nodded slightly. He stepped forward to take the gift, his fingers trailing reverently over the embossed cover. "These are Chopin's original manuscripts," he breathed, already opening the book. "Look at his notations, Mom." "That's very thoughtful," Alice said quietly, and David heard the surprise in her voice. "I thought maybe we could look at them together," David suggested. "If you'd like." Leo glanced between his mother and David, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're him, aren't you? My father?" The directness of the question shouldn't have surprised David. He'd always been the same way, preferring to cut straight to the heart of things. "Yes," he admitted. "I am." Leo closed the book carefully, placing it on a nearby table. "Why are you here now?" "Leo," Alice started, but their son shook his head. "No, Mom, I want to know." He faced David squarely. "Why now? Why not before?" David sank onto the couch, trying to meet his son's steady gaze. "Because I made a huge mistake, Leo. The biggest mistake of my life. When your mother told me she was pregnant with you, I was scared. I was young and focused on building my company, and I thought I couldn't be a good father." "So you left us?" The question held more curiosity than accusation. "I didn't just leave." David glanced at Alice, who had moved to stand behind Leo, her hands on his shoulders. I told your mother that having a baby would be too complicated. I suggested she..." He trailed off, unable to say the words. "You wanted her to get rid of me." Leo's voice was quiet but clear. Alice's grip on Leo's shoulders tightened. "Honey, you don't have to." "Yes, I do, Mom." Leo's chin lifted stubbornly. "I need to understand." David leaned forward, his heart breaking at the hurt beneath his son's composed exterior. "I was wrong, Leo, so terribly wrong. Your mother was braver than I could ever be. She knew what I couldn't see, that you were the most precious gift, not a complication. Did you ever think about us?" Leo moved to the piano that dominated one corner of the room, his fingers brushing the keys without pressing them. "All these years?" "Every day," David admitted. "But I told myself it was too late to fix what I'd done. Until I saw you perform on TV. When I heard you play, when I saw how incredible you are." He swallowed hard. "I knew I couldn't stay away anymore." Leo played a soft chord, minor, melancholy. "I used to imagine you at my concerts. I'd look for you in the audience, even though Mom never said you'd come. I wish I had been there." David's voice cracked. I've missed so much. 8 years, 4 months, and 13 days, Leo said precisely, adding another chord that hung in the air between them. That's how long you were gone. The exactness of the count hit David like a physical blow. He looked at Alice, saw the tears she was fighting back. I wrote a piece about you, Leo continued, his fingers finding a familiar melody, the questioning theme from his Wellington Center performance. About the space where you should have been. Mom says music helps us say things we can't put into words. It's beautiful, David whispered. Sad, but beautiful. Like Mom when she thinks about you. Leo's hands stilled on the keys. I see her sometimes watching old videos or looking at pictures she thinks she's hidden away. She gets, this look, Leo? Alice interrupted gently. Some things are private. No, it's okay. David stood, moving closer to the piano, but not too close. He deserves to know the truth. All of it. He took a deep breath. I hurt your mother very badly, Leo. I hurt both of you. I can't change that. But if you'll let me, I'd like to try to be part of your lives now. Not to replace what you have. You and your mom have built something amazing together. But maybe to add something new? Leo considered this, playing a few experimental notes. Would you come to my concerts? Every single one. Even if they're in other cities? I'll be there. Would you? Leo hesitated, then rushed on. Would you have breakfast with us sometimes? Mom makes chocolate chip pancakes on Sundays. David felt tears spill down his cheeks. I'd love that. If it's okay with your mom? They both looked at Alice, who was wiping her own eyes. We'll see, she said softly. We need to take this slowly, Leo. There's a lot to figure out. Leo nodded, then turned back to David. Do you play the piano? I used to. Not very well, and I'm very out of practice. Show me. Leo scooted over on the bench, making room. David sat down carefully, aware of Alice watching them, of the weight of this moment. He placed his hands on the keys, remembering an old favorite, the simple but lovely Première Gymnopédie by Satie. As he played the familiar melody, Leo watched his hands intently. Your fingering is all wrong, he observed, then demonstrated the correct technique. David laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise all of them. Maybe you could teach me? Maybe. Leo's smile was quick but real. If you promise to practice. I promise. David looked up at Alice, hoping she understood he was promising much more than piano lessons. She nodded slightly, her expression softening. Why don't we have some tea? She suggested. Leo can show you his practice routine and we can talk about what comes next. As Alice moved toward the kitchen, Leo began explaining his daily exercises with the enthusiasm of a born teacher. David listened, memorizing every detail, storing away each gesture and expression like precious gems. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning, scored to the sound of his son's voice and the lingering notes of their first duet. 2 weeks after their first meeting, David sat in his office, reviewing photographs from Leo's latest performance on his tablet. He'd attended as promised, watching from the third row as his son played Rachmaninoff, with a maturity that belied his age. The business section of the New York Times lay untouched on his desk, the first time in years he'd ignored the morning markets. A knock at his door interrupted his reverie. Regina Martinez, TechVision's CFO, entered without waiting for a response. Her expression suggested this wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. The board is concerned, she said, settling into a chair across from him. You've missed 3 critical meetings in the past 2 weeks. The Chen merger is stalling and our investors are getting nervous. David set down his tablet, the screen still showing Leo taking his final bow. Regina's eyes flickered to the image, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising. Is this what's been distracting you? Your sudden interest in classical music? That's my son, David said quietly. Regina's professional mask cracked slightly. I wasn't aware you had children. Neither was I until recently. David turned the tablet toward her. His name is Leo. He's 8. And yes, he's been distracting me because I'm trying to make up for 8 years of not being his father. David. Regina's voice softened with unexpected sympathy. You know I care about you beyond our professional relationship. But the timing couldn't be worse. The merger. We'll still be there next week. David stood, walking to his window. I've given everything to this company for the past 8 years, Regina. Everything. And what do I have to show for it? A fortune I can't spend and an empty penthouse? You have an empire you built from nothing, she corrected. Don't diminish that achievement. His phone buzzed. A text from Alice. Leo's asking if you're still coming to his lesson today. He wants to show you something he's been practicing. David smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. When he looked up, Regina was watching him with an unreadable expression. You're falling in love, she said. What? Not romantically, though I suspect there's a story there too. But with the idea of being a father. With this new life that's suddenly possible. She stood, smoothing her skirt. Just be careful, David. Children have a way of breaking your heart. Speaking from experience? My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. Regina's smile was brittle. I was too busy building my career to attend her college graduation. She hasn't forgiven me yet. The weight of her words hung between them. Finally, Regina sighed. Take the afternoon. Go to your son's lesson. But tomorrow we need you focused. The board meeting can't be postponed again. After she left, David gathered his things, including the Chopin manuscript book he and Leo had been studying together. The past 2 weeks had fallen into a tentative rhythm. Piano lessons on Wednesdays, occasional dinners where the conversation slowly grew less strained, and weekends spent discovering their shared love of puzzles and strategy games. Alice remained cautious, but he'd caught her watching them with something like hope in her eyes. Last Sunday, she'd even laughed at one of his jokes, a sound that transported him back to their early days together. The drive to Leo's music school took him through familiar streets that now held new meaning. He passed the park where Alice had mentioned taking Leo for his first steps, the ice cream shop that made his favorite mint chocolate chip, the library where he spent hours reading about famous composers. Inside the historic building, David climbed the stairs to Studio 3B, following the sound of scales being played with mechanical precision. He paused outside the door, watching through the window as Leo worked with his teacher, Christina Wu, a renowned pianist who'd retired from performing to nurture young talent. Mr. Chen? Christina noticed him first, gesturing him in. Leo's been very excited to show you his progress on the Beethoven. Leo beamed at him from the piano bench. In the past 2 weeks, his initial formality had begun to thaw, replaced by an eagerness that made David's heart swell. Dad, listen to this part. Leo launched into the first movement of Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, his small hands stretching to reach the difficult chords. The casual use of Dad, still rare enough to feel precious, made David's breath catch. He settled into a chair, exchanging a quick smile with Christina, who'd been surprisingly supportive of their unusual situation. As Leo played, David noticed something different in his technique. A new confidence, a willingness to take artistic risks. The music soared and whispered, each phrase telling a story. Beautiful phrasing, Christina commented when he finished. But watch your tempo in the development section. It's getting away from you there. I know. Leo's nose wrinkled in concentration. Mom says I'm too impatient sometimes, like... He stopped abruptly, glancing at David. Like me? David finished gently. Your mom's right. I've always been impatient too. It's something I'm working on. Christina looked between them, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps we should work on a duet for the spring recital. Something for 4 hands? Leo's eyes lit up. Could we? Dad's been practicing really hard. He can almost play the Sadi without mistakes now. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. David laughed. I'm nowhere near your level. That's okay. Leo scooted over on the bench. Show Ms. Wu what we've been working on. David sat down, trying to ignore the flutter of nervousness in his stomach. He began the gymnopédie, and after a few measures, Leo joined in, adding a simple counter melody they'd been experimenting with at home. Their timing wasn't perfect, but there was something magical about playing together, about creating something new from the combination of his hesitant notes and Leo's confident ones. When they finished, Christina nodded approvingly. There's potential there, with practice. She was interrupted by a knock at the door. Alice stood in the doorway, her face pale. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Leo, honey, we need to go. Your grandmother's in the hospital. Leo's hands crashed onto the keys in a discordant shock of sound. Grandma Rose? What happened? She fell at home. The doctors think it might be her heart. Alice was already gathering Leo's music books. Christina, I'm so sorry. Of course, go. Christina squeezed Leo's shoulder as he rushed to his mother. David stood awkwardly, unsure of his place in this family crisis. Is there anything I can do? Alice hesitated, then nodded. Could you drive us? I'm too shaken to... Of course. He grabbed their things, following them down the stairs. In the car, Leo sat silently in the back seat, his fingers moving in, his lap as if playing an invisible piano, a self-soothing gesture David had noticed he used when anxious. At Mount Sinai Hospital, they found Rose Morrison in the cardiac unit, looking small and fragile against the white sheets. Her face brightened when she saw Leo, then registered surprise at David's presence. Well, she said, her voice weak but wry. I had to have a heart attack to finally meet my grandson's father. Mom, Alice warned, but Rose waved her off. Life's too short for dancing around things, Alice. You should know that by now. She patted the bed beside her, and Leo climbed up carefully, mindful of the tubes and wires. Now, young man, tell your old grandmother about this duet I hear you're working on. As Leo launched into an explanation, David watched Rose's face. He saw where Alice got her strength, her direct way of handling difficult situations. He also saw the fear she was hiding from Leo. Whatever had brought Rose here was serious. Alice must have seen it too. She touched his arm lightly, nodding toward the hallway. Outside the room, she leaned against the wall, finally letting her composure crack. The doctors want to do surgery, she whispered. Tomorrow morning. She's been like a father and mother to us both since... She stopped, but David heard the unspoken accusation. I'm here now, he said quietly. Whatever you and Leo need. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you. From inside the room, they heard Leo beginning to play an imaginary piano on his grandmother's bedside table, explaining chord progressions while Rose listened with fierce attention, her love for him evident in every line of her tired face. David realized that he hadn't thought about the merger once since Alice's text. Regina's warning echoed in his mind, but watching his son comfort his grandmother through music, he knew he'd made the right choice. Some things were worth risking everything for. The hospital waiting room felt like a tomb. David sat between Leo and Alice as dawn crept through the windows, casting long shadows across the institutional carpet. Rose had been in surgery for 3 hours, each tick of the wall clock echoing in the silence. Leo had fallen asleep against David's shoulder, his iPad showing the paused video of a piano masterclass he'd been watching to distract himself. Alice sat rigid beside them, her coffee untouched and cold. She's the only real family we've had, Alice whispered, careful not to wake Leo. After my parents died in the accident, Rose was everything. She sold her house in Connecticut to move closer to us, helped me raise Leo, never once questioned my decisions. Her eyes met David's. Even when those decisions involved you. David felt the weight of her words, along with the warm weight of their sleeping son against him. Tell me about her, he said softly. Help me understand. Alice's tension eased slightly as she spoke. She taught music at Juilliard for 30 years. That's how she spotted Leo's talent so early. She'd sit him on her lap when he was barely walking, playing simple melodies, teaching him to feel the music rather than just hear it. A small smile touched her lips. She used to say he had an old soul and young fingers. Like his mother, David murmured. Like his grandmother, Alice corrected. I was always more technical than intuitive. You remember how I used to practice? Everything had to be perfect, precise. I remember. David did remember. Long nights at the university practice rooms, Alice drilling the same passage over and over while he worked on business plans, both of them chasing their dreams in different ways. Leo stirred, blinking awake. Is Grandma Rose okay? We're still waiting, honey. Alice smoothed his tousled hair. Why don't you go get something from the vending machine? Dad will go with you. The casual way she delegated this parental task didn't escape David's notice. In the 2 weeks since he'd re-entered their lives, she'd begun including him in small decisions, testing the waters of co-parenting. In the hospital corridor, Leo pressed his face against the vending machine glass, studying the options with unusual intensity. Mom's scared, he said suddenly. Yes, she is, David agreed, seeing no point in shielding Leo from this truth. I can tell because she keeps touching her necklace, the one Grandma Rose gave her when I was born. Leo selected a package of trail mix, Rose's favorite, David had learned. If something happens to Grandma, will you stay? The question caught David off guard. What do you mean? Mom's going to need help, with everything. And I have the competition coming up next month. Leo's voice trembled slightly. I don't want you to disappear again. David knelt down, meeting his son's worried eyes. Leo, listen to me. I'm not going anywhere. Not now, not ever again. Whatever happens with Grandma Rose, whatever happens with anything, I'm here. I promise. Leo studied him with that uncanny intensity he sometimes displayed. People break promises. Yes, they do. I did before you were born. But this time is different. David touched the boy's shoulder gently. You know why? Why? Because now I understand what I'd be losing. And you, your mom, this family we're trying to build, it's worth more than anything else in my life. Leo considered this, then held out half of his trail mix. They shared it in companionable silence, watching doctors and nurses hurry past. When they returned to the waiting room, Alice was on her feet, talking to a surgeon still in scrubs. David felt Leo's hand slip into his as they approached. The surgery went well, the surgeon was saying. We were able to repair the damage and place 2 stents. She's in recovery now. The relief in the room was palpable. Leo's grip on David's hand loosened slightly, and Alice's shoulders dropped from their tense position. When can we see her? Alice asked. She'll be in recovery for another hour, then we'll move her to ICU. Family can visit briefly, one at a time. After the surgeon left, Alice turned to them. Leo, why don't you go first? Grandma Rose will want to see you. But what should I say? Leo looked uncertain. Play for her, David suggested. In your head. Tell her what you're playing and why. She'll understand. Leo nodded, his expression clearing. When a nurse came to escort him, he walked away with renewed purpose. Alone with Alice, David noticed how exhausted she looked. When was the last time you ate something real? I can't remember. She smiled weakly. Yesterday morning, maybe? There's a decent diner across the street. We have time before Leo's done. Let me get you something. To his surprise, she agreed. The diner was nearly empty at this early hour, the smell of coffee and bacon a stark contrast to the hospital's antiseptic atmosphere. Thank you, Alice said after they'd ordered. For staying, for helping with Leo, for... She gestured vaguely. Everything. You don't have to thank me. I should have been doing this all along. Yes, you should have. Her directness was familiar, comforting even. But you're here now, and watching you with him these past 2 weeks. She traced a pattern on the Formica table. You're good with him, better than I expected. He makes it easy. He's incredible, Alice. So talented, so perceptive. You've done an amazing job raising him. We did have help. Her voice caught. Rose. She gave up everything to support us. Her home, her retirement plans, her freedom. She never complained, never made me feel like a burden. After you left, when I was so lost and angry, she just held us together. David reached across the table, taking her hand before he could think better of it. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. "She's going to be okay," he said firmly. "And whatever help you need, with Leo's schedule, with hospital visits, with anything, I'm here." The board meeting, she remembered suddenly. "Isn't it today?" "Regina can handle it." "David," she withdrew her hand gently. "You can't put your entire life on hold. I'm not. I'm finally paying attention to the parts of life that matter." He met her gaze steadily. "The company will survive without me for a few days. This, you and Leo, being here for this, it's more important." Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence. When Alice's phone buzzed with a text from Leo, they hurried back to the hospital. They found Leo in the ICU waiting area, his face thoughtful. "I told Grandma Rose about our duet," he reported. "She squeezed my hand when I described the new ending we're working on." Alice went in next, leaving David and Leo to wait again. Leo pulled out his iPad, but instead of the masterclass, he opened a music composition app. "What are you working on?" David asked. "A new piece for Grandma Rose." Leo's fingers moved over the screen, placing notes carefully. "It's about being scared but not alone." He looked up at David. "Like we are now." David felt something shift in his chest, love and pride and gratitude all mixed together. "That's beautiful, Leo. Will you show me how it goes?" For the next hour, they worked on the composition together, Leo patiently explaining his choices while David offered suggestions. When Alice emerged from the ICU, her eyes red but relieved, she found them deep in discussion about chord progressions. "She's asking for you," she told David, surprising both of them. In the ICU, Rose looked frailer than before, but her eyes were sharp as they fixed on him. "So," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "you finally came to your senses." "Yes, ma'am." "Took you long enough." She beckoned him closer. "That boy out there, he's the best of both of you. Don't waste any more time." "I won't," David promised. "I'm learning that some things are worth sacrificing everything for." Rose's hand found his, her grip surprisingly strong. "Prove it," she challenged. "Not with words, with time, with presence, with love." "I will." She nodded, satisfied. "Now go take care of my family." "And David?" Her eyes held his. "Don't make me have another heart attack to keep you in line." Walking back to Alice and Leo, David realized that somewhere in the past 24 hours something fundamental had shifted. The careful dance of recent weeks had transformed into something deeper, a real family, bound together by crisis and love and music. His phone buzzed with messages from Regina about the board meeting, but for once, David didn't feel torn. Some choices once made became easier to keep making. He slipped the phone back in his pocket and joined his family, ready to face whatever came next together. The Tech Vision boardroom felt colder than David remembered. 12 faces regarded him with varying degrees of disappointment and concern as Regina finished her presentation. "The Chen merger is officially dead," she concluded, clicking off the projector. "They signed with our competitors this morning. A merger we've been working on for 18 months. Bradley Winston, the lead investor, interjected. "Would anyone care to explain how we lost a $12 billion deal?" The silence was deafening. David could feel the weight of accusation in every glance directed his way. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably Alice confirming Leo's upcoming recital schedule. He resisted the urge to check it. "I take full responsibility," he said, standing. "My recent personal situation—" "Yes, let's talk about that." Bradley's voice cut like ice. "Your newfound interest in playing family man has cost this company dearly, David. The market has noticed your absence. Our stock has dropped 15% in 3 weeks. I had a family emergency. You had a choice, Bradley corrected. The same choice every CEO faces, business or personal life. For 8 years you understood that distinction. Now suddenly you're missing crucial meetings to attend piano recitals. David's jaw tightened. My son is none of our concern. Bradley leaned forward. The board has been patient, David, but this merger was meant to be your legacy. Instead, it's become a very public failure. Regina cleared her throat. Perhaps we should discuss contingency plans. A knock at the door interrupted her. David's assistant, Michael, entered with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry, sir, but there's an urgent call. It's about Leo. David was on his feet before Michael finished speaking. In the hallway, he grabbed the phone. Alice? It's Christina Wu. The piano teacher's voice was tight with concern. There's been an incident at Leo's rehearsal. He had some kind of panic attack, ran off the stage. Alice is trying to calm him down, but he's asking for you. David was already moving toward the elevator. I'm on my way. David? Regina's voice stopped him. She stood in the boardroom doorway, her expression torn between sympathy and frustration. If you walk out now. He met her gaze steadily. They're my family, Regina. And what about your other family? The thousands of employees who depend on you? The shareholders who trusted you? The elevator dinged. David stepped inside. Tell the board I'll have my resignation on their desk tomorrow morning. At the Wellington Center, David found Alice outside the rehearsal hall pacing. Her face showed relief when she saw him. He's in the practice room, she said without preamble. He won't talk to me, won't talk to Christina. He just keeps playing the same passage over and over. Through the practice room window, David could see Leo at the piano, his posture rigid with tension. The music that filtered through was aggressive, almost angry. Nothing like his usual style. What happened? Alice ran a hand through her hair. The competition committee changed the requirements. They want a different piece. Something he's never played before. He has less than 2 weeks to learn it. And with Rose still in the hospital, he's been trying to be so strong. Alice's voice cracked. Taking care of me, practicing extra hard, visiting Rose every day. I should have seen this coming. David squeezed her shoulder gently before entering the practice room. Leo didn't look up, his fingers attacking the keys with almost violent precision. That's a lot of anger in those notes, David observed quietly. Leo's hands stilled. I can't do it. The new piece, it's too hard. Everyone's counting on me and I can't do it. David sat beside him on the bench. Want to know a secret? That's exactly how I felt when I started my company. Terrified of letting everyone down. What did you do? I worked harder. Asked for help when I needed it. And eventually, David smiled ruefully. I learned that sometimes letting people down isn't the worst thing in the world. Sometimes it's more important to be honest about what you can and can't handle. Leo's shoulders slumped. I don't want to disappoint Mom or Grandma Rose. Hey. David turned Leo to face him. Your mom and grandmother are proud of you no matter what, and you know what, so am I. Even if I quit? Even if you quit. But I don't think that's what you want to do, is it? Leo shook his head slowly. I want to play, I don't want to do it alone. You're not alone. David glanced at the sheet music. Bach's Partita in D minor. That's a challenging piece. Christina says it's too advanced, but the committee insists. Leo's fingers traced the notes without playing them. Then we'll work on it together. Every day until the competition. I'll talk to Regina about adjusting my schedule. David stopped, remembering the board meeting he'd just walked out of. Actually, I think I'm about to have a lot more free time. What do you mean? David chose his words carefully. Sometimes we have to make choices about what's most important to us. Today I made mine. Leo seemed to understand more than David had said. Because of me? Because of us. All of us. David gestured to the piano. Now, show me the part that's giving you trouble. For the next hour, they worked through the piece measure by measure. David couldn't help with the technical aspects, but he could offer encouragement, strategic suggestions about breaking down difficult passages, and most importantly, his presence. When Alice peeked in later, she found them still at the piano. Leo's tension replaced by focused determination, as David listened attentively to his 20th repetition of a particularly challenging section. "Better?" she asked from the doorway. Leo nodded, then looked at David. "Can we go see Grandma Rose? I want to tell her about the new piece." "Of course." David stood, suddenly aware of how his expensive suit clashed with the casual atmosphere of the practice room. "I'll drive." In the car, Leo fell asleep in the back seat, emotionally exhausted. Alice turned to David. "Christina told me you left a board meeting to come here. It was time to set my priorities straight." "David," her voice held a note of warning. "You can't abandon your company for us. Leo wouldn't want that." "I'm not abandoning anything. I'm choosing what matters most." He glanced at her. "The company will survive without me as CEO, but Leo needs his father now." Alice was quiet for a long moment. "And what do you need?" The question caught him off guard. In all the recent chaos, he hadn't really considered it. But looking at Leo in the rearview mirror, seeing Alice's concerned face in the passenger seat, he realized the answer was simple. "This," he said softly. "Just this." At Mount Sinai, they found Rose sitting up in bed, color returning to her cheeks. She took one look at Leo's face and opened her arms. "Rough day, Maestro?" Leo crawled carefully onto the bed beside her, mindful of her monitors. As he explained about the competition changes, Rose stroked his hair, exchanging knowing looks with Alice. David hung back, watching this family he'd been given a second chance to be part of. His phone buzzed again. Probably Bradley or Regina dealing with the fallout of his departure. He turned it off without checking. Some music, he was learning, was worth any price to hear. 5 days before the competition, David woke to the sound of piano music filtering through his penthouse. He'd given Alice and Leo the door code for early morning practice sessions, but this was different. Not Bach's partita, but something more haunting, personal. Following the melody, he found Leo at the grand piano, still in his pajamas, playing by memory. Alice sat on the couch nearby, cradling a coffee mug, her expression thoughtful. "That's new," David said softly, not wanting to break the moment. He woke up at 4, saying he had to write it down before he forgot. Alice's voice held equal measures of pride and concern. He calls it Hospital Nights. The piece was unlike anything Leo had composed before. More complex, more emotionally raw. David could hear echoes of their vigils in the ICU, the tension of waiting rooms, the relief of recovery. As the final notes faded, Leo looked up. "Did you hear how I used the diminished seventh there? Grandma Rose taught me that. She says sometimes the darkest chords make the resolution more beautiful." "She's right." David sat beside him on the bench. "How is she doing with the rehabilitation exercises?" "Better. The therapist says she can come home next week." Leo's fingers found another melody, the Bach piece he needed to perfect for the competition. "I want to play this for her, to show her I didn't give up." The past week had been intense. True to his word, David had resigned as CEO, though he remained on the board at Regina's insistence. The business world was buzzing with speculation about his sudden departure, but he'd ignored it all, focusing instead on helping Leo prepare for the competition. They'd fallen into a routine: morning practice sessions, afternoons with Rose at the hospital, evenings working through the most challenging passages of the partita. Alice had been skeptical of David's constant presence at first, but as Leo's confidence grew, she'd softened. "Your tempo's more consistent," David observed, as Leo played through the first movement. "The phrasing in the middle section—" A sharp knock interrupted them. David opened his front door to find Regina looking like she hadn't slept. "The Chinese investors are threatening to pull out," she said without preamble. "They're calling an emergency meeting. We need you there." "Regina, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't crucial." Her eyes moved past him to where Leo sat at the piano, Alice now standing protectively behind him. 2 hours maximum. The company you built is falling apart, David. At least help me save it." David turned to Alice, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded slightly. Go. We'll be fine here. The corporate world felt alien now as David sat through the video conference, watching numbers flash across screens, listening to concerns about market stability and leadership transitions. He answered questions mechanically, his mind still on the notes of Leo's new composition. 2 hours stretched to 3, then 4. His phone buzzed with a text from Alice. Leo's getting anxious, where are you? Before he could reply, Bradley cornered him in the conference room. The board has a proposition, the investor said. Stay on as CEO until the quarter ends. Help us stabilize things. We'll make it worth your while. Double your current compensation package. David thought of Leo at the piano that morning, playing through his fears and hopes. My answer hasn't changed, Bradley. This is about more than money, Bradley pressed. It's about legacy. Everything you've built. I'm building something else now. David stood. Something more important. He found Leo and Alice at Christina Wu's studio, working through the partita's final movement. Leo's playing was tense, mechanical, all the morning's progress seemingly erased. You're late, Alice said quietly as Leo continued playing, his frustration evident in every note. I know, I'm sorry. He needs consistency right now, David, structure. I know that too. He moved toward the piano, but Alice caught his arm. Do you? Because it feels like you're trying to make up for 8 years of absence in 2 weeks. It's too much, too fast. For all of us. Her words stung with truth. He'd thrown himself into fatherhood like he'd once thrown himself into business. All-consuming, full throttle. Maybe she was right. Maybe they needed space to find their own rhythm. Leo's playing stopped abruptly. I can hear you whispering, he said, turning on the bench. If you're going to talk about me, do it where I can hear you. David recognized his own directness in Leo's tone. You're right. I'm sorry I was late and I let you down. Are you going back to your company? No. But I'm learning that being here doesn't mean being here every minute. I need to find a balance, we all do. Leo considered this, his fingers absently finding the opening notes of Hospital Nights. Grandma Rose says music is about the spaces between notes. That without silence you can't hear the beauty of the sound. Alice's hand slipped from David's arm. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, Leo said with a hint of a smile. You just weren't listening. In the right spaces. Christina Wu, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. Perhaps we should focus on the competition piece. Leo, from the development section. As Leo returned to Bach, David and Alice exchanged a look of shared amazement at their son's insight. She gestured toward the door and they stepped into the hallway. He's right, Alice said. We need those spaces. Time to adjust, to find our way. You can't fix 8 years of absence by being omnipresent now. I know. David ran a hand through his hair. When I'm not here, I'm terrified of missing something important. Another first, another milestone. You will miss things. That's part of being a parent. But it's the quality of the moments you're here that matters, not the quantity. Inside the studio, Leo had stopped playing. They found him staring at the sheet music, his expression troubled. What if I'm not ready? He asked as they approached. The competition's in 5 days and it's still not perfect. David started to speak, but Alice caught his eye, silently asking him to wait. This was one of those spaces, a moment for Leo to work through his fears without immediate rescue. Finally, Leo's shoulders straightened. I need to practice the third movement again, Dad. Will you turn pages? Of course. As they worked through the rest of the afternoon, David noticed a subtle shift. Leo seemed more focused, more determined. He'd stopped looking to David for constant approval, instead finding his own way through difficult passages. That evening, as they drove home, Leo fell asleep in the back seat, his competition music clutched to his chest. Alice touched David's hand lightly. Thank you, she said. For what? For learning to listen to the spaces. In the rearview mirror, David watched their son sleep, remembering the haunting notes of hospital nights. Sometimes, he realized, the most important music was the kind you couldn't hear, the silent symphony of a family finding its harmony, one careful measure at a time. The morning of the competition dawned cold and clear. David stood in Rose's hospital room watching as she fussed with Leo's bow tie through the mirror. Despite her doctor's concerns, she'd insisted on being discharged for the day. "Wild horses couldn't keep me from this performance," she'd declared. "Remember," Rose said, smoothing Leo's collar, "perfection isn't about playing every note right. It's about making people feel something they've never felt before." Leo nodded, but his reflection showed the strain of the past 2 weeks. Tinarkanog, circles shadowed his eyes. He'd been up late practicing, then awake before dawn composing. The new piece he'd started, Hospital Nights, had grown into something larger, more complex. David had heard him working on it in stolen moments between Bach practice sessions. Alice entered with a wheelchair. "Transportation's here, Mom. Leo, honey, are you ready?" "Almost." Leo turned to David. "Will you help me warm up backstage?" "Of course." David caught Alice's eye in the mirror. They'd discussed this, keeping Leo's routine as normal as possible today, despite the pressure. The ride to Carnegie Hall was quiet. Leo sat between his parents, fingers moving in silent practice on his knees. Rose watched him from the front seat, her face a mixture of pride and concern. Backstage was controlled chaos. Young performers in formal wear moved about like nervous birds. Parents hovered with last-minute instructions, and piano notes drifted from practice rooms. In their assigned warm-up space, Leo settled at the piano while David arranged his music. The Bach partita's familiar opening filled the small room. "Stop," David said gently after a few measures. "You're rushing." "I know." Leo's hands fell into his lap. "I keep thinking about the middle section. What if I forget the fingering? What if—" "Hey." David sat beside him. "Remember what Grandma Rose said about perfection? Make them feel something they've never felt before," Leo repeated. Then, quieter. "Dad, can I play something else first? Just for practice?" "Of course." Leo's hands returned to the keys, but instead of Bach, he began playing Hospital Nights. The piece had evolved since that early morning in David's penthouse. Now it told a complete story, fear giving way to hope, discord resolving into harmony. As the final notes faded, David noticed Alice and Rose in the doorway. Rose was crying silently, and Alice's hand was pressed to her mouth. "That's it," Rose said firmly. "That's what you need to remember when you play Bach, that feeling, that truth." A stagehand appeared. 5 minutes, Leo." The backstage corridor was emptying as performers took their places in the audience. David knelt before his son. "No matter what happens out there, I want you to know something." He took Leo's shoulders gently. "These past few weeks watching you work so hard, seeing your dedication and your heart, they've been the proudest moments of my life." Leo's eyes, so like his own, filled with tears. "Even prouder than when your company went public?" "Infinitely prouder." David pulled him into a hug. "Now go show them what music really means." Alice stepped forward to kiss Leo's forehead, whispering something David couldn't hear. Then Rose took his hand. "Remember, Maestro, perfect imperfection." They found their seats just as the lights dimmed. The first few performers were good, technically proficient, well prepared. But as the program progressed, David felt a growing certainty that something special was coming. Finally, the announcer's voice. "Our next performer is Leonardo Morrison, playing Bach's Partita in D minor." Leo walked onto the stage, acknowledging the audience with a small bow. In his black suit and perfectly straight tie, he looked older than his 8 years. He took his seat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands on the keys. The first notes were hesitant, not quite the confident attack the piece demanded. David held his breath, feeling Alice tense beside him. Then something shifted. Leo's hands stilled for a moment, And when they returned to the keys, everything was different. He wasn't just playing Bach, he was telling their story. Every phrase carried echoes of the past weeks, hospital vigils and early morning practices, tears and triumphs, a family healing through music. In the notorious middle section, where Leo had struggled most in practice, his fingers flew with newfound freedom. He wasn't thinking about perfect fingering anymore. He was feeling the music, letting it flow through him like a river finding its natural course. David glanced at Alice and saw tears streaming down her face. Rose sat forward in her wheelchair, her hands clasped as if in prayer. Around them, the audience was utterly still, caught in the spell of a young boy's perfect imperfection. The final movement emerged like sunrise, each note carrying both strength and vulnerability. As Leo played the last chord, letting it ring into silence, David realized he'd been holding his breath. The audience erupted. Leo stood, bowing as roses rained onto the stage. But his eyes sought out his family, and when he found them, his smile outshone every stage light. In the intermission that followed, critics and competition judges clustered around them, praising Leo's innovative interpretation. Christina Wu appeared, beaming with pride. "That wasn't just Bach," she said, hugging Leo. "That was your heart speaking through Bach." Rose reached for Leo's hand. "Come here, my brave boy." When he bent to hug her, she whispered, "You made me feel things I've never felt before." Later, as they waited for the judge's decision, Leo sat between his parents in the green room. The other competitors buzzed with nervous energy around them, but Leo seemed peaceful. "I didn't play it perfectly," he said suddenly. "I changed some things, made them more like what I was feeling." "That's exactly what made it special," Alice assured him. "Mom?" Leo's voice was thoughtful. "Remember when you used to say that sometimes broken things come back together stronger?" Alice's eyes met David's over their son's head. "Yes, I remember. I think I understand that now." Leo leaned against David's shoulder. "It's like what happened to us, isn't it? We were broken, but now we're stronger." David finished softly, wrapping an arm around his son. The door opened. A competition official appeared with the results. Leo straightened but didn't let go of either parent's hand. In that moment, before any announcement could be made, David knew with absolute certainty that they had already won something far more valuable than any competition could offer. They had won their way back to each other through music and love and perfect imperfection. The official began to speak, but David barely heard the words. He was too busy watching his son's face, seeing in it the future they would build together, a future full of music, both played and unplayed, in all the beautiful spaces between notes. 1 year later, David sat in the same Carnegie Hall seat, watching Leo adjust the microphone at the grand piano. The audience buzzed with anticipation. This wasn't just another competition. This was the premiere of Leo's first major composition, Symphony of Second Chances, performed as part of the Young Composer's Showcase. Rose sat beside him, fully recovered and radiant in a deep purple dress. On his other side, Alice's hand rested lightly on his arm. Their relationship had evolved over the past year, growing from cautious co-parents into something deeper, though neither had rushed to define it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Leo spoke into the microphone, his voice clear and confident. "This piece tells the story of my family. It's about loss and forgiveness, about the music we make in the spaces between heartbeats, and about how love sometimes takes the longest road home." David's mind drifted to the moments that had led them here. Leo had won the Bach competition, but that hadn't been the real victory. The triumph had been in what followed: morning pancake breakfasts, evening practice sessions, weekends filled with music and laughter. David had learned to be not just present but purposefully present, treasuring each moment without trying to control it. The business world had adjusted to his new priorities. He'd started a smaller tech company, one that allowed him to set his own schedule around Leo's performances and Rose's Sunday family dinners. Regina had taken over as CEO of Tech Vision, and under her leadership, the company was thriving in new ways. Leo's fingers touched the keys, and the hall fell silent. The composition began with a single note, held long and pure. The moment of his birth, Leo had explained during rehearsal. Then came discord, the chaos of separation, represented by clashing harmonies that made the audience shift uncomfortably in their seats. The middle section told the story of Alice's journey, fierce, independent themes that spoke of strength and sacrifice. David heard echoes of her lullabies, her determination, her unwavering love for their son. Rose's influence appeared in graceful arpeggios that supported and enhanced the main melody, just as she had supported their small family. Then came the change, the moment Leo had seen David in the audience that first night. The music grew more complex, weaving together themes of uncertainty and hope. David recognized pieces of hospital nights, transformed into something new, something that spoke of healing and possibility. In the audience, Christina Wu dabbed at her eyes. She'd helped Leo develop his composition over months of extra sessions, encouraging him to pour his truth into every note. The result was extraordinary, not just for his age, but for any composer. The final movement began softly, almost tentatively. It was the sound of a family learning to trust again, to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. Leo's hands moved across the keys with absolute assurance now, telling their story with both technical brilliance and raw emotional honesty. David felt Alice's fingers tighten on his arm as Leo played the passage that represented their growing closeness, not just as co-parents but as two people rediscovering the love that had never quite died. Last week, over coffee after one of Leo's practices, she'd finally agreed to have dinner with him, just the two of them. They were taking it slow, letting their relationship find its own rhythm, just as Leo's music was doing now. The composition, built to its climax, a moment of pure joy expressed in cascading notes that seemed to fill every corner of the hall with light. Then gradually, it settled into a peaceful resolution, different themes harmonizing in ways that hadn't seemed possible at the beginning. As the final notes faded, Leo remained still at the piano, head bowed. The silence held for one breathless moment before the audience erupted in thunderous applause. Rose was the first to stand, tears streaming down her face, followed quickly by the entire hall. Leo stood, bowing with a grace that reminded David of both his mother's elegance and his grandmother's dignity. When he looked out at his family, his smile could have lit up all of Manhattan. Backstage after the performance, they found Leo surrounded by music critics and composers, all eager to discuss his unprecedented achievement. He handled their questions with modest confidence until he spotted his family approaching. Then, he was just their boy again, running to be enveloped in a group hug. "Did you hear it?" he asked eagerly. "Did you understand everything I was trying to say?" "We heard it all, Maestro," Rose assured him, kissing his cheek. "Every single note. Even the parts I couldn't put into words." Leo looked between his parents. "Especially those parts," Alice said softly. David knelt to meet his son's eyes. "You told our story perfectly. But you know what's even better?" "What?" "We're just getting started. There are so many more stories to tell, so much more music to make together." Leo's eyes sparkled. "I already have ideas for my next piece. It's about where we're going, not where we've been." "Speaking of where we're going," Alice interjected, "Grandma Rose's celebration dinner reservation is in 30 minutes. As they gathered their things, David noticed Leo hanging back, watching them with an expression that seemed too wise for his 9 years. "What are you thinking about?" David asked. "I was just remembering something Grandma Rose told me, about how music is really about faith, believing in notes that haven't been played yet." Leo took both his parents' hands. "That's what this year has been like, believing in our future even when we couldn't hear it yet." Outside Carnegie Hall, the spring evening wrapped around them like a warm embrace. Street musicians played on the corner, adding their melodies to the city's endless symphony. David looked at his family, Rose radiant with pride, Alice's eyes, soft with possibilities, Leo practically bouncing with creative energy, and felt the truth of his son's words. They had all taken a leap of faith, believing in notes that hadn't been played yet. And now, finally, they could hear the music of their future, not perfect but perfectly them. A symphony of second chances playing on. Alice caught his eye and smiled, a private moment in the midst of their celebration. Later, they would have dinner at their favorite restaurant, just the two of them, and talk about new beginnings. But, for now, they walked together toward Rose's favorite Italian place, their footsteps adding to the rhythm of their shared story. Leo hummed fragments of his composition as they walked, already adding new variations, always creating. David recognized the theme. It was the part about love taking the longest road home. Sometimes he realized the longest road was the only one that could lead you where you were meant to be all along. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you got a second chance to walk it. This time with the right people by your side and the perfect music in your heart. At what point in your life did you have to choose between following your professional dreams or prioritizing your family? How did that decision change your journey, and what song would represent that transformation in your life? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.